morning to everyone. Hopefully you're in the right session. You've come to learn about and talk about app-based workers, platform workers, particularly what we call gig drivers. And we've got a couple of panelists who are scheduled to present, one who is here. My name is Bob Bruno. I am the facilitator of the panel, and I'm also a professor at the University of Illinois in the School of Labor and Employment Relations. So in just a second, and I see a few other people jumping on, I'm gonna hit the record button, and hopefully I do this appropriately. And oh, it looks like maybe right there, it looks like we're going. It looks like it's recording to the cloud. Yeah, recording to the cloud. I think we did it. Okay. All right, well then with that, let's get going. And how nice to have you with us today, even if it's virtual. So you can see the description for the session, and the presenters all have in common that they have studied and want to bring an investigation, a deeper investigation into app-based work, what we call platform work, gig work, very important, of course, around the world, and certainly it's a very dynamic and unfolding political question. Various states looking at ballot initiatives, proposals, how to define these drivers. Are they independent contractors? Should they be W-2 employees? Is there some third position, regardless of what you call them? Should there be minimum wage laws that cover them? Should there be other worker benefits? Should they be able to unionize? And obviously the firms have very strong positions opposed to unionization and to traditional employee status. And a growing percentage of the workforce, although we're not actually able to easily collect that data or track that data. Despite that, researchers are educating us. They're making headways into helping to describe this workforce. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So on the program, there were 3 papers. One group are not able to join us due to some personal conditions. One of our presenters is with us, and we're hopeful that that a second one will also join us. And so depending on whether that second person joins, we will either have an extended time for our one presenter and lots of conversation and questions, or we'll divide it somewhat equally if the second person joins us. So we'll get started here. And I want to introduce the presenter who is with us, and that is Larissa Petrucci. And Larissa was recently a postdoctoral fellow with the Project for Middle Class Renewal at the School of Labor and Employment Relations, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I'm also an instructor. Larissa has been with us for just a short period of time and has been the principal investigator and co-author of a number of really important studies. One that we're very excited to bring to you here today that looks at app-based drivers in Illinois. But Larissa is recently now working, she's left PMCR. We're sorry to lose her, but we're very proud of her work here in a short time. And Larissa has taken a research position with the operating engineers, correct, Larissa? And you'll be stationed in Sacramento. You can, I've forgotten the number of the local out there, but the idea is to really create a research capacity that will look at the construction industry principally. And this is an area that you've also done some good work in. So Larissa is a co-author of research we've done here in Illinois. Full disclosure, I'm one of those co-authors, but quite frankly, Larissa has really carried the ball here and done great work. So I'm going to step back. I'm going to give her at least 20 minutes to talk through this research and where she's at with the research, what we've learned, what we're attempting to study. And then I'm going to look for that second presenter to jump on. And Larissa, at around 20 minutes, either you'll pause or I'll step in and we'll determine where we go from there. Does that sound like a good plan? All right.
Yep, that sounds good.
All right, then I'm going to step back. I'm going to mute my microphone.
Okay.
And I'm going to let you take it away, Larissa.
Okay, great. Well, let me start with the screen share. Okay, are you able to see my screen all right? Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for that introduction, Bob. It's so great to be here with you all today. Thanks so much for coming. And, it's nice that we can at least be together virtually, if not in person, and still be able to chat about some of these topics that I'm sure we all really care about. So I'm here today to present research that I conducted with my co-authors, Dr. Robert Bruno and Frank Manzo, who's at the Illinois Economic Policy Institute, who also does a lot of amazing work. So based on a survey of 502 gig drivers in the greater Chicago area, we analyzed the job quality of these workers across a number of dimensions in order to kind of offer a driver and worker perspective that we hope will help policymakers make kind of better determinations about the employee status of these workers by really looking into the kind of job quality experiences that they have. Especially as state policymakers deliberate over their employment designation, the study really tries to provide a granular perspective of how independent contractor status might be impacting the quality of their work in this significant sector of the gig economy, which again, we really hope will influence kind of these discussions around the future of work in Illinois and beyond. So what is the gig economy? Gig work has become kind of a mainstream word that we've all heard of. It's a concept that we're now all really familiar with, but still researchers debate exactly what gig work entails. The fact that gig work is such a contested term that can be difficult to define, I think really reflects, the kinds of different ways that this work can be done and the amorphous character of gig-based work and other contingent work that we know can kind of pose problems for those who have done these jobs, as we especially saw throughout the pandemic. So today, gig work is usually used to describe short-term or temporary work that's done by freelancers or independent contractors or people who are self-employed. They might not know how long the contract is going to be or when they're going to get another contract, making it kind of a gig type job. But a study from the Economic Policy Institute that recently came out just a couple of days ago actually argues that the term gig work is a misnomer that helps companies propagate the myth that these workers have more independence and control over their work than they actually do, an issue that we're going to touch on today. And most significantly, gig work has grown alongside new technologies, which has led to the widespread use of digital technologies to mediate work. So kind of app-based gig work. So again, now when we think about gig work, we're usually thinking about gig work that is mediated through apps. While digital platforms do offer opportunities for workers to directly connect with customers to provide services, this arrangement can create further distance between the employer and the worker, which of course companies say promote flexibility as these workers have independent contractor status. But of course, we're going to interrogate that a little bit. So while companies like Uber and Lyft tout that independent contractor status allows workers to be more flexible, what we know is that this employment classification also creates quite a few constraints. As independent contractors, employing organizations can eliminate their responsibility for providing workers with health coverage, leave, overtime pay, even minimum wage. Independent contractors also do not have access to benefits like unemployment, workers' comp, access to recourse against workplace sexual harassment, and are of course denied the ability to form a union. So, in many ways, this employee classification is creating a lot of barriers and constraints for workers that, some may argue is limiting the control that they have over their work arrangements. Still, gig employers claim, and this has become kind of a mainstream claim as well, that gaining these benefits for full-time employees could come at the cost of their flexibility, a narrative that's been used by employers as states debate the proper employee classification for these workers. Yet we know that these are not the decisions that workers have to make between flexibility and kind of protections in the workplace, because there are plenty of examples of workers who do enjoy flexibility alongside the benefits of regular employee status, including Uber's own office workers. Uber employees enjoy a range of benefits, including employee discounts, childcare and family leave, vacation and sick time, health insurance, retirement and stock options, and especially in the context of COVID, new flexible work arrangements. At the same time that Uber touts this flexibility that they offer their full-time employees, they claim that making drivers full-time employees would constrain their flexibility. So some contradictions in this narrative with the ways that they treat the range of employees that they hire. So though employees of platform-based drivers have treated these workers as independent contractors, there's actually nothing to say that they are necessarily or inherently independent contractors, because this actually has to come through legal debates, through court cases, and the creation of new laws that aim to determine how these workers should be classified. So one way to kind of think about this is that employers continue to classify these workers as independent contractors. And if states or courts don't come in to make an intervention to say that is incorrect or not correct, then companies are allowed to continue to act this way, because they can just continue to have workers file tax forms that show they're independent contractors and not have any issues there. But of course, this is now coming to a head in a number of states. So in California, voters approved Proposition 22, which classified drivers as independent contractors. The proposition provided drivers an income based on quote unquote engaged time, or time that they're driving to a fare or with a passenger in their vehicle. So not time kind of fueling up or cleaning the car or between passengers. So prior to the passage of Prop 22 in November 2020, economists found that the law would only guarantee a $5.64 per hour wage to Uber and Lyft drivers in the state after accounting for these vehicle operating expenses. So then in early January, after this proposition was passed, the Service Employees International Union and 4 app-based drivers sued the government in the California Supreme Court. Ultimately, a court in California ruled that 2 sections of Prop 22 were unconstitutional, and that as a result, the whole measure would be unenforceable. So now the measure is, not in effect, although there is an appeal to the case that shows that the law is unenforceable. But of course, California is not the only state to take up the issue of how to classify gig drivers. In Washington, a new law was recently passed, which provides minimum per trip payments, paid sick leave, and workers' compensation benefits for rideshare drivers, which is a big win there. However, the law still effectively ensures that these workers will maintain their status as independent contractors, and that transportation network companies will be kind of free from the imposition of additional requirements on their business by local governments. So local governments in Seattle would not be allowed to really kind of regulate these companies. And now in Massachusetts, a similar bill is being proposed that would increase workers' minimum wage, but only while they are actively picking up or dropping off passengers, so that active or engaged time we talked about, and still keeps companies from having to provide unemployment insurance, workers' comp, and other benefits, as these workers would still be classified as independent contractors. So while supporters of the Massachusetts law include DoorDash, Instacart, Lyft, Postmate, and Uber, opponents of the law include the Boston Independence Drivers Guild, the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, ACLU Massachusetts, Gig Worker Rising, and Massachusetts Jobs with Justice, alongside a number of other kind of worker-focused groups and centers. So in the context of these ongoing debates, research analyzing gig worker job quality is really important now more than ever. In this upcoming report that we hope to release, hopefully later this summer, maybe early fall, my co-authors and I investigate the working conditions of app-based drivers in the Chicago metropolitan area from November 2021 through March 2022, using a survey of more than 500 drivers. Ultimately, we find that app-based platform drivers face several on-the-job issues that comprise their employment quality that I'll get into today. So I'm going to share just a few key findings across a number of dimensions that we looked at. These include hours, income, health insurance, expenses, health, safety, and harassment, and then of course the issue of flexibility, employment status, and unionization preferences. So a little bit about the study. Between November 9th, 2021 and March 18th, 2022, we commissioned a survey of workers who drive for at least one app-based rideshare or delivery platform in and around the Chicago metropolitan area. Using an online survey tool through Qualtrics, we surveyed a total of 502 individuals working for one or more app-based driving services in and around the Chicago metropolitan area. The standard margin of error for the survey results is 4.4%. While the average age of the driver in the study was 38, ages ranged from 23 to 76, so kind of a wide age range there. And the majority of drivers in the sample are white and men and have a high school diploma or equivalent. All right, so let's take a look at employment and hours. So drivers' tenure averaged about 3 years. Most of them had been working for these companies for about 3 years. Although, we will note it is difficult to track how long folks work for these companies because many of them go in and out of work. So maybe they work for them for a few months when they're in between other jobs or when they're trying to make extra money and then they leave. Or some of them work, for 2 years full time, making all their income from that job. But overall, drivers worked in our study about 3 years. And they did work significant hours. Drivers report an average of 34 hours a week, with the top 25% of workers putting in 41 hours a week, and the bottom 25% still putting in about 24 hours per week. So this kind of narrative that comes out sometimes from Uber and Lyft that, these can be independent contractors because these are people who are just trying to make a few extra bucks here and there, is not really reflected in this study and in many other studies of these workers. In fact, very few app-based drivers are working just a handful of hours to make a couple extra bucks. 6 in 10 workers worked for an app-based platform company for 30 hours a week, 30 hours or more per week. And almost half, 45% of workers worked 40 hours or more. We also found that workers spent 39% of their time on routine car preparation, like cleaning, sanitizing, fueling up, and waiting for passengers to request rides. So that's time that's not being paid from their employer. So regardless of whether or not these workers are employed in other jobs, a significant proportion of workers in the study report working as a gig driver full-time, again, raising questions about why these workers shouldn't have access to the benefits that other full-time employees enjoy, even at these same companies. So drivers were also asked about their annual income from all jobs, as well as their annual income specifically from app-based platform work. The results showed that app-based drivers tend to be lower paid than the rest of Chicago metro area workforce. After accounting for work expenses, drivers reported that they earned an average of $30,000 per year. By contrast, their counterparts in the overall Chicago metro area earned an average income of $66,000 a year. While this means that their incomes are 54% below the average local labor market. We also found that many app-based rideshare and delivery drivers earn less than $15 per hour, which was the minimum wage in the city of Chicago at the time that we conducted the survey. More than 4 in 10 drivers, or 41%, reported that they earned less than $15 per hour, including 30% who earned less than $10 per hour. Conversely, although corporations like Uber and Lyft say that drivers can earn up to $35 per hour, as you can see in this graph, only a small percentage actually achieve this level of compensation. So while 87% of app-based drivers have some form of health insurance coverage, 13% also remained completely uninsured. Overall, a total of 40% of app-based drivers are either uninsured or covered by taxpayer-funded plans like Medicaid or by taxpayer-subsidized plans like the Affordable Care Act. So now let's take a look at driving expenses. So driver expenses have been really kind of an underexplored area of app-based platform work, as it can be kind of difficult to estimate just how much it is that workers spend. So a lot of the other reports that have been out on gig drivers really try to make some kinds of estimations based on, something like the numbers from AAA or IRS data. But we did, survey workers to ask them about their expenses. And importantly, while drivers are able to use tax write-offs for some of their expenses, the requirement to keep detailed receipts and record all of their costs does create some barriers for workers to get money back that they have spent already to be able to perform their work as gig drivers. In fact, TurboTax recommends that gig drivers purchase a work-dedicated cell phone to remove all the difficulties of accounting for work-related expenses, because it can be that tricky to kind of track. The most significant expense for workers is, of course, their car. So 59% of drivers in the study purchase their car with the primary purpose of driving for an app-based transportation and delivery platform. For those who work as an app-based driver as their primary job, about 7 in 10 workers purchase their car just for work. Overall, workers pay about an annual average of $6,095 on operating costs each year. So I want to particularly highlight the cost of personal protective equipment, or PPE, that drivers had to purchase during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to regular cleaning costs incurred by drivers, they paid an average of $406 a year to take precautions against COVID-19. So unlike some employers during COVID, drivers risked their safety without hazard pay and with little support from their companies. In fact, Lyft actually opened an online store to sell protective gear in the summer of 2020, rather than provide their own drivers with masks or safety materials for free. So beyond the expected costs of being a professional app-based driver, workers also incur the unexpected but routine cost of traffic tickets. And of course, traffic tickets are not something that you can write off. App-based drivers are really incentivized to pick up as many passengers as possible and to pick up and drop off passengers quickly, so that they can get positive reviews and so that they can have more drivers or more riders in their car, so they can, of course, increase their earnings. So drivers really can experience pressure to violate traffic violations. It's not surprising that 64% of drivers have incurred ticket costs, averaging about $339 over the last 12 months. For those who did receive a ticket, there were racial and ethnic disparities regarding whether or not they were actually fined from that ticket. 100% of Hispanic or Latinx drivers who were ticketed did incur a fine, compared to 96% of Black drivers and 90% of white drivers. This finding is reflective of other research in Illinois that shows that Black and Hispanic drivers are more likely to be stopped than their white counterparts, and here really more likely to incur the traffic penalties and fines once they are stopped. Okay, so beyond kind of the expenses that workers have to pay, often out of pocket, there's also health and safety issues that, of course, these workers face, as all workers do in the workplace. As you might expect, working in a job where you're sitting for the majority of the day, which if any of you are, academics or researchers, you experience, but also where you're in a vehicle subject to accidents on the road, makes these workers particularly vulnerable to injuries. And again, it's important to note that because they're independent contractors, they don't actually have access to workers' compensation. So, they aren't able to get that compensation back, and they're also not eligible for paid medical leave. So about 69% of drivers in the Chicago area reported that they experience pain specifically because of their app-based driving job. And 40% of workers report that they suffer injuries and illnesses from transporting passengers. And in addition to illness and injuries, 75% of drivers said that they avoid taking a bathroom break while working for an app-based platform. And so the issue here is not just that workers are risking some of their kind of health by avoiding these bathroom breaks. It can also make driving conditions more dangerous. So in order to avoid a bathroom break, research has shown that, like, for example, taxi drivers may just kind of limit the amount of liquids they drink while on the job. So they kind of purposely dehydrate themselves so they don't have to use the bathroom as much. Well, this can be especially concerning because dehydration can actually negatively impact driving performance and increase driving areas, which a number of studies have actually looked at. And some studies actually show that dehydration can be the equivalent of driving while intoxicated. So the fact that app-based drivers work in their cars without intervention from employers or support from colleagues also makes them vulnerable to safety risks from customers. So not just risks from being on the road or pain from being in the car, but risks from really interacting with customers in a really private space where they don't have access to other colleagues or really anyone else but those who are in their car. So Chicago area drivers in the sample report really high rates of feeling unsafe. Nearly half, 45% of drivers report that they feel unsafe between one and a few times per month, and 6% report they feel unsafe daily. While feeling unsafe was common among all drivers, 80%, a greater proportion of women, 87%, and people of color, 86%, reported that they feel unsafe at least once a month. Black and Hispanic or Latinx drivers were also more likely to report that a customer canceled their ride upon seeing them pull up. While 41% of white drivers report that a customer had canceled their ride upon seeing them, 56% of Black or African American drivers and 62% of Hispanic or Latinx drivers report this ride cancellation, which suggests racial discrimination and, of course, can lead to losses in income that don't happen just because you don't get that rider, but then you get a negative rating and it's more difficult to pick up drivers in the future. So why are workers reporting that they feel unsafe? Well, they feel unsafe because they're experiencing violence and harassment while on the job. Verbal violence was the most common form of violence or harassment, experienced by almost 60% of drivers. Another 53% report that they experience harassment by customers for upholding local and public health guidelines, such as the mask mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. 41% of drivers have experienced some form of harassment from the police, so that's 4 in 10 drivers. And sexual harassment was also prevalent, with 40% of drivers reporting that they experienced sexual harassment. And the gender breakdown of that was 62% of women experienced sexual harassment and 34% of men. And finally, when we think about flexibility, employment status, and unions, we can kind of gain some insights from these workers. So as discussed earlier, an argument that is sometimes made in favor of maintaining app-based driver status as independent contractors is that it affords them flexibility, which is something they prefer. However, research has found that flexibility and autonomy that drivers can exert are, of course, constrained by economic necessity, such that drivers might be compelled to work at undesirable times or undesirable locations, or engage in risky pickups if they feel that it's unsafe, as I kind of described before, so that they can make that income. And again, if these corporations can give their highest paid employees, such as data scientists and accountants, their flexibility, then they should also be able to give lower paid frontline drivers flexibility, regardless of whether they are considered independent contractors or classified as employees. So in this study, only 3 in 10 drivers report that they have complete control over where they drive. App-based drivers are divided on whether or not they should be classified as employees of the company or continue to be treated as independent contractors. Of the 502 respondents, a total of 229 drivers said that they should be independent contractors, so 46%, and 273 said that they should become employees of the company, so 54%. So slightly more felt that they should become employees of the company, but still a significant proportion, said remain independent contractors. However, drivers are not split over workers' rights. 91% to say that they should have the right to unionize. So based on the survey results and related and academic policy research, there's at least 7 ways that policymakers in Illinois across the country can improve the quality of work for app-based drivers. So number 1, we suggest that states should make app-based platform drivers regular employees. Drivers would have the same basic labor protections such as minimum wage, overtime pay, unemployment insurance, workers' comp, and paid medical leave. Drivers would also have access to same legal protections as traditional employees against sexual and racial discrimination, workplace injury, and job insecurity. We also suggest that these workers are protected under the National Labor Relations Act. There is a wide power imbalance between drivers and the platform companies that they work for. The legal right to organize into labor unions and negotiate collective bargaining agreements could address these employment inequities. We also suggest requiring sexual harassment training for all drivers. With proper trainings, drivers can identify, respond to, and report incidences Raising driver knowledge about harassment and discrimination would hopefully strengthen their ability to advocate and promote their safety. But that wouldn't be enough. We also suggest some kind of structural changes that would potentially make their work safer, including providing an option to cancel a ride due to safety concerns without it affecting their acceptance status. So right now, if a driver decides they want to cancel a ride because they don't feel safe, that their acceptance rate goes down and they may be less likely to get other passengers in the future, impacting their income. So drivers vulnerable to passenger abuse should be able to act with discernment in completing rides without risking their employment status. We also think that drivers should be provided with an I-Pass in Illinois. So currently the system for tolls that are incurred by workers is that if they experience a toll, that cost is kind of baked into the price that the passenger is paying. So essentially the passenger pays a higher rate if they go through tolls, but it's pretty difficult to track how much of that is actually appropriately determined for the rate of the toll that they're actually paying. So they're paying these tolls out of pocket. So instead you could do what drivers in many other industries do, like UPS, FedEx, and even taxi companies, and provide these workers with an I-Pass. So there is not an independent, credible source for determining whether the percentages of fares paid to the drivers are actually covered by the additional tolls. So this would kind of address that. We also think that workers should be paid for all of their time, not just their engaged time. Drivers are at work when they make themselves available to passengers and should be compensated for the time that they're waiting to be summoned for a ride, as well as, kind of cleaning their car or taking care of other kind of routine maintenance of their car that is required for them to be able to work. And finally, we actually suggest that app-based platform companies remove rating systems to prevent app-based drivers from engaging in unsafe behavior or experiencing harassment or discrimination. Drivers who earn low wages are incentivized to work in ways that may increase their earnings, but also put them in more dangerous working conditions. So, it does seem a bit different to think about removing these rating systems because that's been at the core of these app-based platform companies for so long. But I would encourage you all to think about taxi drivers who have not had these rating systems before, and to really, place an importance on removing the implicit bias that passengers may have and, explicit discrimination that passengers may have that leads to racial and gender inequities for these workers. All right, well, thank you so much for coming today. We'll see if we have another speaker now. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of time to chat with each other. But thanks so much.
Larissa, if you want to, there you go. So as it turns out, our second speaker did not arrive, which is why I didn't send you a signal to wrap up. And I really appreciate your doing such a wonderful job in presenting the research that we've been working on. I think all of you can see why I'm so disappointed to be losing Larissa as a postdoctoral fellow here at the Project for Middle Class Renewal. However, we now have some time. We've got about 20 odd minutes or so, and you've all listened to the presentation. I'm sure you came with knowledge, interest, insight, questions about these workers, and it would be great if we could hear from you. So what we'll do is, if you have a question, a comment that you'd like to provide, why don't you use, if you know how to use it, use the raise hand button, and I will then look for you and call on you. If the raise hand isn't working, well, look at that. Richard Cornell is setting the pace. There we go. So if you would do that, I will then call on you and give you a chance to ask your question and comment. Try to keep your question and comment as brief and concise as you can so that we have enough time for everyone to participate. And I want to encourage you to offer these questions and comments because this work is not complete yet. So you will be help educating us and particularly Larissa, who will be doing some rewriting after today, I'm sure. All right. So with that, Richard, your hand was up first. You have the floor, sir.
Okay. I'm the founder of SFH, the Workplace Community, and we have an exhibit here. I don't know if any of you have taken a chance to look at it, but it was designed to help people like the gig workers you're discussing, in that it allows the companies to treat them as 1099 employers, but yet to have the employees have all the things that you wanted, such as being paid by the hour for the work they do, having workers' comp and all that stuff. I'm going to be available for questions later today on one of the breakout streams. I don't want to take up your time now, but I would suggest, if you could, to take a look at that and give me your comments to see if this would be helpful, because I'm looking for people to collaborate with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. That's a good invitation. Okay. All right. Let's see. Who else? Don't be shy. No, there are no stupid questions. There are no bad comments. There can be mean comments. So we don't want you to be mean. Be generous. All right, here we go. Kevin, you're up, my friend.
Hello, since we've got some time, I would like to hear more about kind of your data gathering procedure, because I'm an economist, so it's kind of like, oh, I download the data set, but I'd like to get more into mixed methods and like interviewing people and stuff. So kind of curious how you went about that.
Good question. Larissa.
Bob, would you actually want to take kind of your initial conversations that you had to kind of get this study rolling, since you were at the start of that?
Yeah. So, it's a challenge to reach this population. And we considered a number of different ways to go. What we did was enter into conversations with various groups in and around the Chicago area that were offering services to drivers, that were providing some level of advocacy for them. And we asked if they had a listserv, was there a group of, was there a Facebook page? Who could we talk to, start a relationship with, who would be willing to send a link to the study? And so we worked that, and that was a little slow in developing. Ultimately, we offered a small payment for the survey that was run through the University of Illinois. That did help to increase the participation. In fact, I think our survey participants, as far as our research shows, is twice as large as anything that we've seen out there. And so the help of community partners and using those relationships to do outreach is what enabled us to drive people to the website to take the survey. We did talk about focus groups. I know Larissa had a real interest in doing that. Ultimately, I think the length of time we took figuring out how we were going to reach this population, and then wanting to get this research reasonably moved on by this conference, we did not follow up with focus groups. But if we had wanted to do that, the relationships that we built with community organizations, I think would have made that possible. So one recommendation I would make to others is build relationships with community organizations that know these workers. And if they trust you, then you might have an opportunity to reach them and do this qualitative work. So Larissa, did you want to add anything? I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, I see my colleague, my wonderful colleague, Ting, how are you this morning?
Good. Thanks, Bob. Like a really interesting study. I'm really glad that I participate in this session. I just have a question about like the recommendation. I think they are valid recommendation. They are actually really thoughtful, laid out. But I just want to kind of like, let's put our business owner's head for like 5 minutes. Like if you have a group of a super flexible workforce, right? And they have a different type of hours, they have a different type of like, schedule control, and they want different type of flexibility. How do we kind of like construct a system to say, oh, like maybe we generate 2 tracks, that one tracks are full-time drivers and one tracks are part-time driver. I guess my question is like, within the organization, how do we manage them? Like through compensation, through benefit, how did we manage this complex system? That's my first question. The second question would be, because we have a different kind of rideshare companies within the same region, right? A lot of like those drivers, they probably work for multiple platforms. So do you think the sectoral bargaining is the way to go? I like your thoughts on that, right? Because since workers all want unionization. My third question would be, yesterday during the session, we heard like, there are grassroots movement organizing those like, gig workers. And sometimes they kind of oppose the union doing sectoral kind of arrangement with the company. So how do we manage the relationship between community organizing and the unionization and also the platform management? So that would be my three questions. Sorry if that's too many.
No, they're not too many. They're like too hard, but that's why Larissa is here. And by the way, there are some really smart people on this panel who might be able to contribute to your answers. I know I have some thoughts, but Larissa, do you want to take a shot at any one or all three of those?
Sure. Yeah. So the first question about, kind of how to manage benefits for workers, given that they might have some autonomy over their schedules and their hours that they're putting in. And maybe mentioning this kind of like 2-track system of the part-time and full-time. I think that, of course, companies will probably be more likely to be amenable to the argument that maybe we'll get these benefits to full-time employees instead of part-time employees. But I think we should be really careful about kind of proposing those changes, because we've, kind of seen that has created situations where companies then put like caps on how many hours workers can get, or they, I don't know, it would be interesting to think about how that would work in Uber and Lyft, how they could cap part-time status, because we know what they do in the service industry, for example, is just hire a ton more workers so that everyone's only working, 20 hours a week or something, so that they can't get any benefits. Something that, kind of happens at Starbucks, for example. But we have other examples of companies where part-time and full-time workers both get benefits. So I'm thinking about UPS. So part-time workers at UPS still get full health coverage, even if they're working only 5 hours a week. So I think, it is possible to give workers benefits for being part of your company, regardless of how many hours that they're working for the company. And I think that shouldn't really cause any constraints on the ability of workers to decide which hours they're working, or, when they want to work. Of course, there's still going to be incentives for workers to work particular hours when there's these kind of like surge prices that happen at particular times of the day. But yeah, I would say, like, I would be careful to think that the number of hours you work needs to be associated with whether or not you're going to have access to benefits, though I understand that is a political issue that, businesses want to address. Okay, and then was your second question the one about sectoral bargaining? Yeah, so I mean, obviously I think sectoral bargaining would be useful, but I guess not necessary, because I imagine if you're working, I'm thinking about like if you're working at Uber and Lyft, which is the case for most of these workers, if Uber is the one who says, okay, we're going to take up this challenge, we're finally going to give workers, the benefits that they deserve, then workers are at least getting those benefits through their job at Uber, even if they're picking up extra hours at Lyft, they're getting that health coverage or that paid time off. Although, maybe the paid leave is, kind of associated, I guess, with how many hours you're working. So you would be probably putting in more hours for Uber if you were, for example, like getting more paid leave from them. But ideally, even if it wasn't sectoral bargaining, if you were able to bargain with Uber, I don't know how Lyft would be competitive to get drivers if they didn't kind of follow that lead. And we can also see there has been examples of sectoral bargaining, I believe, in other countries. I know the UK has unions for drivers. I know Uber drivers are all unionized under the, I think it's called the GMB, the general, I can't remember what the M is. It's like the general member union in the UK. So there are examples of Uber and Lyft drivers who do unionize. So it's definitely possible to do. And then I forget what your third question was now.
It was the hardest one. It was the relationship between the community advocacy
Oh,
and what unions, right? And that's a great question, Ting. So go ahead. You saved the hardest for the last.
yeah, the hardest for last. Yeah. So I think that, you know, we know in all industries, there are always workers who are skeptical about unionization, workers who fear that bringing a union in is going to mean they actually lose autonomy as the union kind of controls what they do. So on the one hand, I think that, you know, those of us who do partner and work closely with unions should encourage them to be thoughtful about the ways that they organize these campaigns and really encourage these, you know, if it's kind of like national level unions coming in to help these workers, that they're actually letting the workers drive the campaign and not themselves. And I think we've seen the success of that with Amazon as workers have really taken, you know, initiative to develop these campaigns. I would also say, you know, hopefully, even if there were workers who were skeptical about unionization, if the union kind of went through and they were able to win, you know, a union vote through all the workers at that location or company, then the workers still get to decide what they're bargaining over. So hopefully there would, you know, still be some kind of autonomy there. But that's the best answer I can give. I don't know if other people, I'm sure other people have other thoughts on this. But thanks so much for all your questions.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments, either about what Larissa presented or the thoughtful questions that she responded to? Oh, looks like, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Well, it's always nice when we get nice commentary in the chat. May I ask, can you see the chat, Larissa? Do you want to just read it and go ahead and see if you want to respond?
Sure. So the question is, in the policy recommendations section, how do you consider heterogeneity within the driver community? Is there a need for further subdivision and layered protection? Because maybe not every gig driver has high economic dependency and time dependency on the job. So do you mean like, if there are workers who are working a full-time job and they're just kind of doing Lyft on the side to make some extra money, maybe they don't have the same access to wages or benefits that workers who are more dependent on the job would get?
Do you want to feel free if you're, yeah, please.
I mean, well, if that is the question, then I guess it kind of goes back to what Ting Ting was saying, which is like, okay, do we have like part-time workers who don't have access to benefits versus full-time workers who do, which could be possible, because in that case, you know, again, like if you're dependent on Uber and Lyft for your income, then you're probably working for them full-time. So the people who are more dependent are getting that coverage or those wage benefits. I mean, I think in terms of wages, I think everyone who's doing the job should be paid the same. I think I think it can be problematic when part-time and full-time workers are paid differently, which I don't know if it happens that often, but I know can be the case depending on if there's seniority systems in place, et cetera. So yeah, I don't know if you want to follow up on that, on what you mean by like layered protection, that might be interesting to think about, but yeah, I don't know.
I'm also curious, if the person who asked a very thought-provoking question has a suggestion or a recommended targeted kind of protection that would reach within a certain constituency of driver. Maybe you have a thought in mind. The reason I'm asking if you have a suggestion is perhaps there's something in our database that Larissa can dive back into, and perhaps there is some other novel recommendation that can be brought. And feel free to type it in if you'd like to, if you prefer communicating that way. Okay. Let's see. Anybody else? We've got just a few minutes left. Okay. Larissa, any final thoughts? Like you said, we're hoping to get this work done and get it released sometime maybe in the early fall or late summer. And obviously it's an important issue being discussed and debated in Illinois. I think the rideshare companies targeted Illinois along with some other states to try to push a kind of California Prop 22 measure. So we expect it to be an important policy debate as we go forward here in Illinois. Oh, good. Larissa has put her, yeah. So which of those, I guess your @Illinois will work for a while, right?
I think so. And I think my Illinois should be able to be forwarded to my new email, hopefully. But
Okay.
yeah, if you email me at the Illinois one and you don't hear from me for a minute, then you can also email me at the Gmail one, and maybe we can think of ways to collaborate, or, I'd love to hear more of the work that I'm sure you all are doing.
All right, that's fantastic. And if any of you have an interest in knowing more about the project for middle class renewal at the School of Labor and Employment Relations, where Ting Ting and I are both faculty members, feel free to reach out to me. I guess I should put my email also here to you. And if you have an interest, you can reach out, and I'm happy to respond to any interest. We're always looking for great researchers, and we'll certainly continue to look to hire folks who want to come in and do great research, looking at workers and the workplace. And I can send you to our website where you can see all the policy reports that we've done there. All right, well, I think that's then it. And we will thank you all for participating. I hope you attend other panels. There's a lot of great stuff going on the next couple of days. And otherwise, wherever you are in the world, stay safe and be well. All right.
Oh, I don't think you share the email address.
Oh, you know what? I shared my, yeah, I shared my personal email. I shared my university email, but I did not. Okay, I believe because we redid the website. So this should take you to the labor education program at the School of Labor and Employment Relations. The Project for Middle Class Renewal is housed within that unit. And when you get to that site, you can click on Project for Middle Class Renewal, Policy Reports, Research, and that'll take you to that page. And if you're interested in doing research here, reach out to me directly. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, I think that is good. And thank you, Ting, for catching that. All right. All right. Well, fine. The technology worked. We did good. All right. I'll let everybody go.
Thanks, everyone.
Be well. Take care.
Bye.